Welcome to the PSF panel discussion on the academic boycott of Israel. We know that it's a very controversial issue about whether we should boycott Israel academically. It's often more controversial issue than the economic boycott of Israel. Today we're not here to discuss whether Israel is in a present state, whether it's in a apartheid state. I think that as a PSF we know what our views are, and if you have a moral conscience, we believe that you have the same views. But we're here to discuss whether that means that they should be boycotted academically. Today we'll have three speakers in our panel discussion. First up, we'll have Faisal Garba, who's an academic at UCT in sociology. Next, we will have our Vice Chancellor of UCT, Max Price. And lastly, we'll have Mahmoud Patel, who's an activist and academic at UWC. So I'd like to open the floor to Faisal Garba.
I have to begin by thanking the PSF for the invitation and to congratulate you for putting together this. I think it's a very important event. I want to kick off by making reference to something that happened today. There was a little round of kind of stampede around the Chinese festival to try to get hold of some African food as part of something called African Month. And the decisive day in the African Month is the 25th. It's called Africa Day. But this is an attempt to sanitize the meaning of that day. The day is called Africa Liberation Day. It's a day which marks the coalitions of forces that were opposed to colonialism on this continent. We saw the colonization of Africa as linked to the colonization of every part of the world. We saw oppressed people as being inherently connected by the desire for freedom, irrespective of where they come from. So it was a liberatory notion of belonging and humanity, which went beyond narrow concerns about nationality and whether somebody is going to have a practice or religious in place. So today, I will spend some time talking about what does it mean for us to discuss the possibility of boycotting Israeli institutions from Africa and from an African university. So therefore I have to talk about what is the university, what is the idea of the university, and what does the university mean in Africa, fundamentally. So let's begin. I spend most of my time with African migrants, mainly in Europe and in Germany in particular. They have lots of horrendous stories to tell about the journeys to Europe, but also everyday life. At times, it is quite heart-wrenching speaking to these people. As you can feel from my voice, the recollection is traumatic. But there is something different about the experience of Africans who find themselves in India. So we have to ask the question, what is different? Well, the difference arises from the nature of Israel. Israel is a nation which is built on ethno-racist foundation. The idea of political community as an open space where people belong to the public sphere, irrespective of their origin, has no basis in it. So you have Ethiopian Jews who, according to the constitutive basis of Israel, have a right to return. Most of them are denied that right to return because they are not Jewish enough. Okay? So the idea of race as a concrete category of human existence which is immutable is implicit in every aspect of the idea of community. So today, African immigrants in Israel work overtime, and often they are not paid overtime allowances because they are not supposed to work in the first place. So you can easily be threatened with police sanctions just for demanding for overtime pay. And just to illustrate this, I'm going to quote something which was said recently. It is reported by the Arab, so it's not some newspaper from South Africa, it's an Israeli newspaper. It's a report of a press conference that was held by Benjamin Netanyahu, and it's about the questioning of illegal immigrants. Netanyahu said, and I quote, "The flood of illegal workers infiltrating Israel from Africa is a concrete threat the Jewish and democratic character of our country. Okay? So you have a country whose understanding of itself excludes some people ontologically because of who you are. And speaking from this continent, where our very being has been defined by our otherness, I think we have a fundamental obligation to hold this kind of narrow perspective of what it means to be a human being. But you see, often when we talk about the need to boycott the state of Israel, we are met with the idea that, look, we're going to infringe on the academic freedom of Israeli academics, some of whom might be opposed to the occupation. Well, that's a plausible argument. But you see, if you look at the character of institutions in Israel, they are deeply embedded in the military state architecture of that country. Most of these institutions, after the global neoliberal attack on universities, began to, so to speak, go through lots of basic reorganizations around research and staffing. So they had to look for private funding as a way to cover the shortfall. And of course, the private funding was covered by the most expensive aspect of the economy, which is the military-industrial complex of that state. So many Israeli institutions are involved in research for purposes of maintaining the occupation. Indeed, soldiers are given extra deadlines and extra tuitions so they can write their exam. It's easier for a military person to submit an essay late than for a student suffering from a heart ailment. Okay? So the institutions are not just an ivory tower which is supposedly lying outside of the state structure. It is part of the constitutive basis of the state. And now I want to spend some time talking about the idea of the university. What is the university? Now I think there are as many understandings of the university as there are academics. But I think the university is a community, and I use community here loosely. I'm not sure where community in some respect, but I use it loosely. It's a community of people devoted to ideas for the purposes of impacting on society as a natural constituency and the natural environment that we find ourselves. Now, I think in carrying out this duty, a university has two options. The first is the university can either produce conscious beings who think of the skill that is imparted onto them and think of the application of that skill. Or the university can produce intellectual robots. And I do not use this as a derisive term. I simply use it as a term to, so to speak, describe the way in which the notion of skill and consciousness interrelate. What do I mean by an intellectual robot? By an intellectual robot, I mean a person whose entire understanding of skill and his place in the world is governed by the notion of received knowledge. Such a person has no time to interrogate the relationship between the knowledge and the consequence of the knowledge in the real world. So an engineer who is trained to be unconcerned about the likelihood that he or she is partaking in the creation of a remote-controlled vehicle that can kill children, actually does kill children, is an intellectual robot. And the question I ask myself is, if universities like UCT continue to collaborate with Israeli universities, don't we risk a situation where our young engineers will actively encourage the occupation by partaking in designing the latest remote control vehicles that kill women and children and further the expansions in the West Bank and Gaza? So it's not some abstract notion of academic freedom as the right of scholars to produce knowledge and disseminate this knowledge in spite of opposition by political forces outside of the university, but is to understand the embeddedness of the university in society. Okay? That you see, the university is often referred to as an ivory tower. But you see, the ivory from which that tower is built often comes from the toil of ordinary people. And in the case of Israel, the ivory that produces the towers that fund the research that maintain the occupation is on the backs of the dehumanization and the devalorization of Palestinian lives. And as I began, this devalorization does not restrict itself to the Palestinians. It extends to anybody who cannot be racially defined as Jewish. So sitting in an African university, we cannot bandy around notions of academic freedom in a decontextualized manner. One has to ask the question, what does academic freedom mean? If academic freedom means denying somebody the right to come to UCT so they can exchange ideas with others. And I will use concrete examples. In 2011, the Department of Sociology attempted to reach out to cognate institutions around the world, but mainly in the Global South, to establish something along the line of an existing program called the Global Studies Program. The Global Studies run between UCT, University of Freiburg in Germany, and Nehru University in India. So the idea is to have a South-based UCT. UCT Sociology invited sociologists from Bezet University in Palestine, Professor Shaka. Professor Shaka is a major scholar in agrarian studies and also notions of community in terms of building alternative forms of community whose foundation is based on collective forms of organizing. So we thought this is a way in which students can be exposed to alternative notions of what it means to be human, such that their livelihoods are not just connected to corporations and what corporations can deliver. Professor Oshaka applied for a permit in the Israeli government, who was denied that permit. We had to postpone that conference for the professor to be here. It took him close to a week to find himself in Cape Town. At the end of the day, the conference took place with his, I think the polite way to put it is mere presence, because he was too tired from the journey to meaningfully engage in the discussion. And all I'm trying to say with this example is that if universities like UCT refuse to end academic cooperation with the Israeli universities, what they are doing is refusing to cooperate with Palestinian scholars. These people are denied the opportunity to move around the world and interact with their peers. Students are routinely arrested and tortured in Israeli prisons. There is a small group called Right to Education based in Bezet University. You can Google that. They track daily arrest and torture of students by Israeli forces. So the question therefore is this: to what extent or at what point does the refusal to identify the fact that this state is a criminal, racist state constitute complicity? Because, you see, in this world, there is a fairly widely held notion that somehow one can occupy a zone of neutrality. Now, I think that's a great illusion. If somebody is approaching another person with a knife, and you think you're neutral, you're simply saying it's fine for them to kill the person. So just to conclude, I want to come back to what academic freedom will entail in this case. It seems to me that any notion of academic freedom has to first and foremost answer the question, what is the essence of the academic project? Now fundamentally, I think the academic project, whether it's about building bridges, or healing people, or teaching students what it means to be in a political community, it is about human flourishing. I think that is the base of the academic project. And if we're talking about human flourishing, then we have to be concerned about the notions of power. Because we live in a world in which the distribution of power is greatly unequal. And so if we decide not to see power relation, we are simply siding with those in whose hands power resides. So I do not intend to, I know the Vice Chancellor is speaking on behalf of the university, so probably whatever you say are not his views. But all I will say is that whether we speak in our personal capacities or representing institutions, we must realize that our actions or inactions have got material consequences. Often these material consequences mean that a child gets shot on their way to school. These material consequences mean that a woman gets raped by a soldier. So we can't lie outside of the reality that power exists and power brutalizes and dehumanizes some people. In all honesty, I think the universities are hesitant for one major reason. And part of the reason simply is funding and world rankings. I mean, let's be honest about it. And it's not about who the vice chancellor is. Whoever the vice chancellor is, the institution might take the same stand. But I think we must, at this point, realize that we cannot rely on the institutions for anything to happen. No changes happen simply because institutions want things to happen. So I think it behoves on us to use our collective will to begin a proper campaign on this campus, which will put the question to this community, and I use again community loosely, whether we want to be complicit in the deaths of young children and women, or we want to say no, like the global community said when apartheid was at its heydays, that every human life counts, whether it's pink, blue, brown, or red. And that notions of narrow, autochthonous understanding of what it means to belong to a community has no place in today's world. We have to move away from this nonsense of indigeneity. And moving away from it does not only mean contesting it here, it means contesting it wherever it finds itself. Ideas of racial, ethno basis of forming a society can simply take us backward. And a university which refuses to see that because it adheres to some abstract notion of academic freedom whose basic formative years was instituted at the time when others were being colonized, stands at the throats of the dehumanization and devalorization of human lives. So I'll stop here in the hope that the point is not about our presentation, the point is about a discussion. And I hope the discussion will lead us somewhere so that next year when we come here, we do not debate the possibility of an academic boycott, we debate how to take the boycott forward. Thank you very much.